Welcome to episode 37 of the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Alexander Slawinski.
And I am Mike Bithell.
Each week we talk games, what it's like to make games, and the random stuff we don't generally find time to talk about because we are playing and or making games. Show note. Thanks to everyone who's telling their friends about this show. Keep giving us feedback and sending those emails to contact@bithellgames.com. That's contact@bithellgames.com. This week's guest, I'm so excited, is Ashly Burch, actor, writer. Many of you listening to this show, actually, Ashly, say hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Many of you listening to this show may know her from the Hey Ash, Whatcha Playin series, but many may not know she's building up a very impressive voice acting resume. And now I knew about her roles as Tiny Tina in Borderlands 2 and her BAFTA nominated role, right?
Yes, thank you. It's weird to say out loud, I suppose, but yeah, for Chloe in Life is Strange, yeah.
So, before we go any further, are we allowed to get BAFTA nominations?
I don't know.
Americans,
I'm trying not to tell anyone about it in case they take it back.
Massively, you're allowed to get nominated. It's considered rude if you win one. That's generally how it works with the BAFTAs. So, yeah. It's massively weighted in our favor. It's an incredibly unfair system, really.
So, however, until I really started diving into your IMDb and your resume and everything else, I mean, I did realize you were Cassie Cage in Mortal Kombat X, and then I just started going down the rabbit hole where it's like Fallout 4, Rise of the Tomb Raider, Star Ocean, Battleborn, and you're in the upcoming Horizon as well?
That I'm not allowed to confirm or deny, actually.
Oh,
I've seen it's on my IMDb, but I'm actually...
Okay, so allow me to not get you in trouble then, and say that the first time I heard the character in that game, and in a normal voice, I was like, is that Ashly? That really sounds like her.
But to be clear, we don't yet know if it is or isn't Ashly.
We are neither confirming nor denying that possibility. So
good start, Alexander. Good start. You're doing great. This is going so well right now.
Ashly, how did you start getting down the path of voice work in games?
Honestly, so I found often people kind of will fall into voice acting a lot. There's lots of really talented like stand-up comedians and on-camera actors that sort of found voice acting and fell in love with it. I always wanted to voice act from a very early age. I originally wanted to be a singer, but then when I hit like 12 or something, I discovered that acting was a thing. And it was actually through playing Metal Gear Solid, actually, believe it or not, that it sort of struck me for the first time that people voice act as a living, because of course if you've played any of those games, Kojima loves his cinematic tropes, and so anytime a new character is introduced, their name appears on screen in text, and then underneath it is a different name. And when I was a kid I was like, who's David Hayter? And I googled him and I found out, oh my god, that's Solid Snake's voice actor. And then after that was like, that's what I want to do. That's absolutely what I want to do. And so Anthony, my brother, and I started Hey Ash, Whatcha Playin like 10 years ago or something now, something crazy. It's been happening for a while. And then when that started getting traction, I kind of had some doors open in terms of voice acting. So Tiny Tina was my first role. And then actually even before Borderlands 2 came out, Valve reached out to me about Miss Pauling for TF2, and then it kind of just...
I had no idea that was before.
Yeah, it didn't come out until much later, but they cast me, I think, even before Borderlands 2 came out, if I remember correctly.
Oh, congrats on that then.
Thank you.
So I'm interested then. I'm interested in how that differs, how VO differs kind of as a job for you as an actor. What's more difficult, maybe what's more easy? Like, what's the big shift for you going into VO?
From on camera, you mean?
Yeah, from on camera, from everything you've been doing up to this point, yeah.
It's actually interesting because being a gamer, I I kind of have an understanding of certain archetypes that commonly are featured in games, and then also stuff like efforts.
Yeah.
So, grunts or pain reacts or jumping sound, that kind of stuff is sort of pretty intuitive to me because I've been playing games my whole life.
You know where it fits in.
Yeah, exactly. And
actually, can we take a second on efforts, just to explain to folks, when you say that, more specifically, what do you mean, and at what point during a VO session do they typically have you do all the efforts?
Oh, sure. So efforts are basically a word to describe any weird noise that your character makes in a game. So essentially they're like any sounds of jumping or landing a jump, so like that kind of stuff, all the way up through you're being burned alive, which I won't make all of your eardrums rupture by doing that. But they're always saved for the end of the session because, as I said, efforts kind of escalate from minor pain sounds to like really intense screams of death.
Yeah.
And if you do those at the beginning of the session, you run the risk of blowing out your voice and being useless for the rest of the 3 hours that you have to be there.
Also, I found, like, depending on the actor, like when I'm directing those kind of sessions, yeah, it's often the thing that makes people feel very awkward and uncomfortable, and rightly so.
Sure.
It's really weird. So kind of getting that done at the end makes sense, it seems.
Yeah, it's funny though, actually, because all of the VO friends that I have that play games, and I'm much the same way. Efforts are actually really fun for us. I mean, if it's like 4 hours of screaming, that's kind of rough. But and typically games are pretty nice, and they tend to keep it to like around 2. But there's something kind of fun about, like, if you've played games and you kind of know that sort of stuff, making noises of jumping and landing and all that kind of thing is sort of fun.
The thing I've noticed with actors is that, if they are gamers, it's such a different recording experience. There's so much less kind of, I guess, hand-holdings, but that kind of sounds a bit more, dismissive than I'd like. But yeah, it's great when a voice actor walks in and just starts talking to you about, like, the game they've been playing, and you realize,
Yeah.
they're going to understand what I mean when I ask for a shout-out. That's great. Okay, cool.
Totally, and it helps to know, like, going into any game, if you're recording different dialogue responses to, like, if there's a dialogue tree in the game,
Sure.
Not playing games, it might be confusing. Like, why do I have 3 completely different emotional responses
Yeah.
to this one character in this one situation? But yeah, so being a gamer, a lot of that stuff is very intuitive. Of course, the thing about recording games especially is that often you record them in isolation. Which hasn't always been the case for me. On Life is Strange, I did a lot of sessions with some of the other actors, which was fantastic. But when you're recording in isolation, it means that you are having to reach the moment every time, completely kind of on your own. I mean, you'll have directors that read with you potentially, but there is something totally different acting against another actor who is there embodying a character. And so, sometimes depending on the situation, it can be challenging. I mean, I think I would say that having Hannah, who plays Max in Life is Strange, having her in the booth with me every time that we did a very emotional scene was so powerful and so helpful because we were just feeding off each other. So there's so many days on that game we were just like in the booth sobbing together. Because you become very invested not only in this character but then in the person that you're working with, and so yeah, there's always a trade-off, and there's also like pragmatic things, like a VO session's very short, so you can have, like, depending on your schedule, you could have like 2 VO sessions, 3 VO sessions in a day, versus on camera you're there and you're waiting for an entire day.
Sure.
Which being a VO person, it's sort of a weird shift. You're like, oh, I'm not standing for 4 hours.
I'm sort of curious, percentage-wise, how often are you reading to the ether as compared to having the other... I understand that sometimes you get to actually have the actor in the room with you,
right.
But how often do you get it piped into your ear if someone had the session prior to you, so at least you have some kind of emotional bounce back?
There are some games that I've been very lucky in that even if the person isn't there, that I do have stuff to read off of, but the majority of games that I've worked on, I'm reading to the ether for sure. Animation is different because animations usually record in a group. which is really cool. So I've done a few episodes of Adventure Time and a couple of episodes on a Nickelodeon show called Pig, Goat, Banana Cricket. And you'll have the entire cast in the room with you, which is really cool. And also, when I was first starting out, was extremely intimidating because you're sitting in a room and like Tom Kenny is being a miracle human, just an incredible actor right next to you, and you're like, oh God. But yeah, it's the majority of the time, I would say, I am talking to no one.
It's great as a director as well because, like you say, the actors do start to bounce off each other, which helps. I mean, we've done it. We did it with Volume. Charlie and Danny were in the same room, and it just the amount of kind of performance back and forth that happens. And then when I'm recording with Andy, who played the villain, I'm having to feed him stuff, and I'm in no way a good actor. So kind of having to do that and having to support his performance personally was incredibly tricky. Whereas if you have like professional actors able to do that for you, it's a logistical nightmare. That's the challenge of it. But right. I if I could, I would record everything animation style. It's just a lovely way of doing it.
Yeah, and we also totally understand. I think that finding animation seems more set up for it, but games, it's harder, I think. I mean, like you said, logistically, it's a lot more of a nightmare to try to get the actors in the booth at the same time, and then animation records completely linearly.
That's the big one. That's the big difference. Because we had to do it. I organized the sessions so there were overlaps basically. So like I'd have one actor in for the morning doing all of their kind of stuff that's just them, and then I'd make sure that there was an hour or two which we could do the cutscenes where they're in the scene with other characters, and then they run off, and the other guy does the rest of it. So it's a juggling act. It can be done, but it's tricky, and right. It would be awesome. But then obviously the other side of that is you don't want to waste the actor's time or your budget, because obviously you're paying for the actor's time. So yeah, it's a balancing act, but it's cool when you can get it done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So have you seen a change in the roles available to you and the style of characters and how they are written? So I'm speaking in almost two sections here. One, you as Ashly Burch, the actor, in starting out with this Ash character, this very specific, you can sort of see those same elements in Tiny Tina as well, but you've obviously taken on completely different roles, BAFTA nominated roles, by the way.
BAFTA nominated.
That are entirely different. So let's start with that one and then look at the bigger picture. So just your path as an actor.
Yeah, the really awesome thing about Hey Ash is that I think it's kind of an immediate shorthand into what I kind of naturally have. This is one of these things where it's hard for me to be to be self-congratulatory literally at all, but naturally do well. So I have a natural comedic sense, I would say, and that's kind of what I'm known for. And so that becomes. It's really easy for someone to click on a video and say, okay, I see what she does, and then kind of decide whether or not that can translate to whatever role they're considering me for. Because I've gotten hired off of Hey Ash at least 2 or 3 times, I would say. With people that didn't even necessarily know me. They just saw or had heard about me before. They just saw Hey Ash and thought, well, we have a comedic character that we need to fill. Like, maybe she could fit. That's actually how Cassie Cage happened.
So do they always expect you then to do like the clipped jokey style of Ash then?
No, actually they so for example, I was brought on for Cassie Cage because apparently there was an article that was written that was like upcoming voice actors that you should know about, and a Hey Ash episode was embedded in the article, and so the writers for Mortal Kombat X saw that and were like, oh, she's funny. Let's bring her in for Cassie. We want Cassie to be funny. And, but as you can tell through, the actual performance that we ended up doing for Cassie, she's very different from Ash. But I think it's just sort of the baseline understanding of this person knows how to deliver a joke, which is awesome that people would see Hey Ash and be like, oh, yes, we'll trust her with a game, a multi-million-dollar game. But the interesting thing is, like for Life is Strange, I just auditioned for it, and they actually they didn't realize until I think this is true. Am I making this up? I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that Michelle told me once that...
Own it.
I'm not making this up. This is the truth of what happened. They didn't know about me as an actor really before they cast me. They just heard my take on Chloe and were like, that's who we want it to be. And so, interestingly, I've gotten lots of cool opportunities to do work based on Hey Ash stuff, but I've never really been asked to do just the Ash character again, which is kind of amazing. Like, I also got cast as Miss Pauling because the guys at Valve knew of Hey Ash. But it was the same sort of thing where, like, we know she has comedic sensibility. Like, she has a good comedic sensibility. But Miss Pauling, of course, is extremely different from Ash. So I guess the one consistency, I suppose, which I'm still trying to work on, as you can probably tell as I'm speaking to you, is I speak very fast. So I have, like, the fast-talking comedic thing. But I haven't really been... I wouldn't say I've been particularly pigeonholed. I've been very lucky in that regard. Because I've kind of played... I mean, Chloe is very different from Tiny Tina, is very different from Cassie, is very different from the characters I've played in Adventure Time. So I've been lucky in that it's opened doors for me, but has not... Hey Ash has opened doors, but has not, like, put me into, like, a weird, narrow corridor. Because Life is Strange is also quite dramatic, quite emotional.
Well, that's something I keep consistently seeing casting comedians and stuff, is that I kind of feel like if you've got a comedic sense, that goes a long way just in dramatic work, in terms of both kind of softening it and making it more human. You know, you're not going to go, you know, over dramatic with it.
Right.
But also I think that instinct, that kind of performance instinct that everyone who likes to be the person, you know, telling jokes at the party, that seems to be an instinct that leads to good performances across the board.
Yeah, I think Joss Whedon said something like that. He was talking about casting for Serenity. He said,
I'm in good company.
Yes, exactly. It's you and Joss, Mike, against the world.
I've never gone wrong casting a comedian.
Yeah.
See, Ashly, you don't have to worry about ego on this show.
Ego? It's fine. I've got it under control, Alexander. It's fine. And speaking on that topic, let's talk about me for a while. So my question is actually from the dev perspective. I think almost all of our listeners, if I'm being completely honest, are kind of indie devs, or they're developers making stuff or thinking about making stuff. And I think VO increasingly, or forever, I guess, has always seemed like this very mysterious thing. People are always super surprised when I cast someone in my game, or when, you know, when even this topic of, like, you know, you have VO in your game kind of comes up. And I'm just interested in kind of what advice would you give to someone maybe listening to this thinking, wow, I need to, like, get a voice actor. What's the advice that you give as an actor? How do you like to work? How do you like the person you're working with to work? You know, what kind of advice could you give to someone? Because often with indies, obviously, they're probably going to have to direct you as well. They're going to probably be in the room doing that stuff. Like, what are your tips to the noob?
Absolutely. So this is first off, I'll say that directing is hard. I've done it before to mixed results, I'm sure. Because even as an actor, you know, you'll hear people talk about line reads, right? And I think they're so prevalent, and it's such a common thing, because articulating all of the things that you want to say in a concise way, and not waxing poetic and taking your actor out of the moment, or just wasting a bunch of time, it's hard. Which is only just not to discourage anyone, but to also, you know, is to say, like, in fact, it's the opposite. Don't be discouraged if it doesn't seem to come intuitively, or if you feel like you're stumbling a little bit, because it is a skill like any other that you have to develop. Even if you are the writer of the game, that does not necessarily mean you're going to intuitively know how to speak to actors about the thing that you wrote. So the main things that I would say, if you are an indie, and you have any friends that are interested in directing, or have some experience that maybe would just kind of do it for you as a favor, or would be, you know, excited about the opportunity, that also might be a cool avenue. But if you're doing it yourself, I think one of the big things, because if you're directing it, you most likely also wrote it, is to see bringing an actor in as first and foremost a collaboration. Being a writer myself, I completely understand the desire to have a line spoken just as you imagined it. But I will say...
Are you laughing at me right now, Mike?
I'm laughing at myself, I'm laughing at you, I'm laughing at anyone who's ever created and worked with an actor. Yeah.
Which I will say, this happens... I mean, this happens to the best of the best. You know what I mean?
Of course, absolutely.
It is something that is completely a natural instinct to have. But the thing is that if you cast someone that you trust, then there is a great opportunity that you have to enrich the work even more by allowing their sensibility and their talent to shine through in the line, versus if you're restricting them to only the read that you can hear in your brain, then you're kind of shackling them, which is why casting is so important. And you know, if you're doing a non-union game, of course you kind of have a very open field, so it will be a bit more challenging to find people, which is not to say that non-union actors are just bad, because that's absolutely not true. Every union actor started as a non-union actor. It just means that, like, you have there's a bunch of people that are union actors, but there's like double, triple the amount of people that are non-union, because
it's a bigger pool. Yeah, it's
a huge pool of people, so you're gonna have to sift through a lot more. And the main thing to think about when you're casting is, can this person take direction? Like, not necessarily are they doing exactly what I want, but when I ask them to adjust something, do they understand what I'm saying and adjust in a way that makes sense to me? So, you know, you want to put a lot of time into casting. You really want to front load a lot of the work into casting, because if you have actors that you trust and that you spent a lot of time, you know, picking and finding the people that you really think are good for not just have like the right voice, but can actually do the work, can actually perform, you know, can actually like deliver the goods in a long-term session, then it makes the recording process much, much easier. Because then maybe you won't feel as married to the lines as you heard them in your head. Trust is such a big part of it. And I know for me, any time that I've found directors that I can truly feel like I can collaborate with, I feel like I do my best work, and it's such a better experience. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out, I am still in myself trying to navigate, like, when do I push, you know, when do I pull back, when do I defer, and when do I challenge? And that's something that I'm figuring out, and I think you know, any actor has to figure out over time. But I think having a director that sees it as a back and forth, like, we are creating this character together, you will get really interesting and really awesome work if you are open to that. But you really can't do that unless you completely trust the actors that you've cast. Absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, if you have the means to do a union game, there's so much amazing talent that you've probably already heard of. In any game that you've played. I mean, also in the non-union space, there's any indie games that have cast non-union, like, you can pick from that pool. There's also, I mean, there's literally just there's so many voice banks online that you could just go and sift through, like, so much, you know, so many reels. But yeah, I would say that I'm afraid all this sounds daunting, but really, I mean, I think it can be really fun. I think it's a really cool, like, obviously I'm an actor, so I'm biased, but, like, being able to, I've worked with indies before, and it's so fun, because indie games often have such care for the story that they're telling. Not that AAA games don't, but, like, it's usually much more focused, and, like, and there's been one person that's just been, like, kind of turning it over and over and over in their head, and it's their baby, it's their world, which totally happens with AAA. But indie games, like, you can just kind of feel like it's a scrappy, like, there's this feeling of, like, everyone banding together to really get it done. And so it's super fun to work for indie games. And I think you'll find that actors will be excited about the projects that you're working on and will really want to help bring out the best that they can out of the game. It just will require, you know, it will require work on your part to find the right people. And then in the booth to trust them, once you have found the right people, to give you the best work, and to not be so precious with the stuff that you've written that you kind of tie their hands. Which is when people kind of lament line reads, I think that's really what they're getting at, is that they're lamenting a lack of trust. or a lack of opportunity to even give you what they can do before you kind of parrot what you want them to sound like. So yeah, I think that's the biggest kind of holistic thing. But yeah, honestly, if you get the right cast, you'll just be delighted. Like you really will. You'll just be so happy with what they give you. Because they're professionals just like you are. So casting is the biggest thing, I think, and then allowing that cast to kind of spread their wings and fly.
Mike, do you agree? As I've been in one recording session with you, and and you very politely informed me, let them do their job.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, no. So I think there was. Yeah, it's all like all of the advice Ashly just gave is amazing. I think the two things I'd pull out. One is the lot to talk about. Just clarifying a couple of points. One is the union issue. So if you're a UK dev, or I don't know what the situation is in Europe, but actually union doesn't really exist in the same sense over here. It's not quite as heavily enforced. The only time I've ever had to deal with the union, so most actors, basically my point is most actors over here are non-union. The only time it's ever come up was when I was working with Andy Serkis, because obviously he does a lot of American work, so he is in the American unions, so we had to kind of deal with that for him. A great union is obviously, it's a good thing for actors, it's great for actors, it's a lot of paperwork and stuff like that, so if you are working with a union actor, the best advice I can give is to work with a professional voiceover studio who have all of the union contracts in place. What that means as a developer then is you can work with the actor, they then officially are recording for the studio, which handles all the union relationship stuff, which, by the way, again, very good thing. And then the studio sells you the voiceover effectively, which means that you're not tied to that union role, which means that as an indie you don't have to deal with all that stuff. But it also means the actors, working under union rules, which is good for them. So that's the only thing I'd add there, is there's a slight wrinkle there for UK. And the other thing was just, so line read. So this is something that you mentioned that I think we might need to unpack. Alexander, say the line, "I should have killed you when I could."
I should have killed you when I could.
Right, so if Alexander was in the voiceover studio saying that line, if I'd written that line, first of all, I need to stop, because that's an awful line. But there's two options I have as a director. I mean, there's lots of options I have as a director, but the two key options I have as a director, one is to do a line read, which is where I say, actually, Alexander, could you just say, "I should have killed you when I could"?
I should have killed you when I could.
Now, what I've just done there is I've told Alexander how to act, which is Alexander's job. Alexander, if he were a real actor, is better than me at acting, so I'm a fool for in any way limiting him, basically he's only going to be as good as my line read. And also, frankly, he would be within his rights to be a little bit pissed off because I've just jumped in and told him what to do. There's a fantastic recording of William Shatner getting a line read done to him and him just freaking out in the recording booth, and it's awful to listen to, but my heart is so with William Shatner because the guy's being rude. The better option is to let Alexander do his line the way he did, but then to break it out and go, well, Alexander, your character here has had chances to kill this character before. Your character chose not to because your character was trying to do the right thing, but now there's a tinge of regret there. There's an upset that he didn't take that opportunity when he could, and since then you've done worse things. So you in a way you feel complicit in that action. So now there's a desire in you to kind of fix that problem. Could you do that again for me? I killed you when I could. And that was and now, as you can see, the performance is better. But yeah, so that's the difference that Ashly's talking about. Just aware that line read might be a technical term that not everyone in the audience understands. The second version is better, working with the actor, because the actor will take the stuff you give them, the kind of the idea about character story. I never do a line read. I stopped Alexander when he tried to do one to one of my actors. Slapped you, Alexander, when you tried that. I broke the rule, actually. Interestingly, I was in a recording session on Friday for our next game. And I don't think I'm giving away anything by saying there's one line in the game. There's actually several puns and jokes in the game. But there's one which is specifically referencing a very famous speech. And the actor was doing it. And for whatever reason, she wasn't aware of the speech as it was said originally, or she didn't understand that it was a quote or whatever like that. So that's the one time I've ever done. But even then, I didn't do the version she had in front of her. I in the booth did the original speech, just so she heard like the rhythm of it and the pacing and the way it was accentuated. But yeah, no, I think that was all amazing advice and super useful to anyone starting out.
And it's also, there's no hard and fast rule as well. Of course, like I've had people, especially if you're in a time crunch, which is totally a realistic thing. And, there was a time where I just was not getting a line, like in one of the early games that I was working on. And the director just asked if he could give one. And I was like, yeah, sure, that's totally fine.
Yeah. Some actors like it. Some actors actually request it. Danny Wallace likes it. Danny Wallace likes you to, like, I've had him a few times just go, Mike, can you just tell me what you want, please?
Yeah, and that's also completely fine, too. And then there are some people that, like, will hear a line read and then understand the intention of what you're trying to say through your line read, but then give it their own way.
That's true.
But, as a general rule, you kind of just want to go in thinking like, okay, this person is professional. Basically, how would I feel if someone took my script from me and then just started writing lines? Sure. And I'm just sitting right there like, do you want to write it? But yeah, and that's the main thing. And I think also, just one last thing to add too, especially if you're a first-time director, don't feel like you need to like puff up your chest and have all the answers and like feel it. Mask insecurity with like, some weird braggadocio. At least I can only speak for myself, but honestly, I've worked with people that have not directed before or this is their first indie game or whatever. And honestly, the main thing is like working with passionate people is fantastic. And so if you give a direction, you're like, and I give you a read and you're like, oh God, that wasn't what I wanted at all. That was a stupid direction. I'm so sorry. You don't even have to apologize. You can just be like, that wasn't the right direction. Let's try this instead. You know what I mean? Like it's okay to give a direction that takes you in a place that you didn't want to go. You can completely just acknowledge that and move on. It's the same thing as me flubbing a take, saying the wrong word or giving you the wrong read. It's not to be taken personally, and it's not something that you should shy away from if you've never done it before, because most voice actors, honestly, are very kind people, and they're excited to be working with you, and they're excited to be working with people that care about what they're doing. And so I think if you were... I've never worked with someone that was passionate and like kind and been like, oh my God, you know what I mean? There's that just doesn't happen.
Sure.
Unless the person's a dick, in which case you don't want to work with them anyway.
Well, thank you so much, Ashly, for joining us today and talking about all of this. Good luck in the future on the games that you may or may not be doing voiceover work in.
I think, you know what you should do? You should do more PlayStation first party, I think. If you can find any opportunities in that field, I think it could really work for you.
Oh, yeah.
Have a look into
Interesting. Yeah. I'll start exploring that area.
And now it's time for what's going on at the studio. And it's the crushing loneliness of Secrecy, Mike, and I can't take it.
You can't take it?
It's the worst.
Secrecy from the audience, not being able to talk about what we're working on.
Or anyone, like that cool thing that happened a couple weeks back, and then there's the thing, but we can't
the cool
talk.
Thing? Oh, doing the VO with the person who I didn't name. Yeah, and then we can't talk about it, and this is terrible, and I know the reasons that we do it. But this is the worst. I just can't wait to see how you react, because this is quite a quick turn. I mean, people will have noticed how quickly this thing has bounced through the different stages just based on our conversations on the show, but we're next time we do like a 3-year project, it's going to be a nightmare for you.
I mean, and I'm not joking here. Like, I like, we're going to need to get me like a therapist or someone that I can talk to.
I totally tell all my mates. Everyone knows what we've been up to. I'm awful with secrets. You can tell your friends.
Can I?
This doesn't feel like podcast conversation anymore. It just feels like we're on Skype. It's good. Yeah, of course you can, if you trust them. Do you trust your friends, Alexander?
I mean,
see, this is what you need a psychiatrist for. You don't trust your friends. I
just don't understand how you get through this when it's like a 2-year cycle or a 3-year cycle, and it's I guess, if you're...
Well, what you do is you put the name of the game on your CV, and then it leaks, and there's an article on Kotaku. That's what you do. That's how you get through it. Because that's the thing. That's the brilliant thing, is whenever anyone's working on not so much stuff just that is your own projects, but I've had friends in the past who've been working on amazing IP or big franchises, and they're just dropping hints like, oh well, it's this-ish thing, and it's set in this era, and and it's like, dude, just say it's fine. It's fine. I'm not going to tell anyone. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
But see, as the guy who sends out the NDAs and on some level writes the worst parts of them, I feel a little.
You're very much the bad parent in the partnership, aren't you? Yeah.
I'd feel like, you lead by example, right?
Sure.
So if I'm the guy who's telling everyone, hey, sign this NDA and shut your mouth.
Can I just specify to the audience that our NDA definitely doesn't specify that people should shut their mouths. It's a very normal, bog standard NDA. Alexander is slightly overstating it. No, I think there's the friendier, right? That's the phrase. That's an international phrase that gets bandied around.
Right.
People who work in the industry understand that you keep each other's secrets.
Yeah, and you make your friends sign pieces of paper that
no, you don't. No, you don't. That's the step you're missing. That's the step that's confusing you, Alexander. You don't get them to sign because they're a friend. I feel like this maybe is an issue that we shouldn't be broaching on the podcast.
I would just like to at some point explore the idea that we just can't talk about things.
It is weird, and it creates these silos, and it's why whenever gamers are there's a thing that I see, and I see it from critics as well, actually, often, where people will review a game and they'll say, why is it not fixed this they'll say like, well, game X did this 6 months ago and it worked, why is this game not got this feature? And this is why. It's because we're all off in our little bubbles, not telling each other on a professional level what we're working on, which means that no one really knows, And for every game that you hear about, probably there's someone else working on something who sees that announcement and goes, oh no, someone else is making it. Like, I know at least 2 indies who were working on games where you explored the universe in a spaceship that saw the No Man's Sky announcement and just went, well, no, I can't do that then. That's not going to work out. Like, it happens because everyone's in their little bubble.
But it's also like the turnaround times of these things. It's like we don't have the time to course correct. This isn't writing a book, right? Like, this isn't writing where you see someone and they've constructed the best sentence ever. And you go back to, what you've been writing. You're like, I will now use that best sentence structure ever. And it is immediately implemented into my work for eternity. Or learning what passive voice is.
Well, that speed with which nice. That speed with which you work. Like, this is weird. It's going to sound like a name drop, but it's genuinely. I had brunch with Greg Miller a couple of weeks ago, and this came up like this. The speed. I'm so
Greg
jealous.
Miller of Kind of Funny.
Of Kind of Funny games. Yeah, they're great. I was talking to him about how jealous I am of YouTubers. That a YouTuber can have an idea, get in front of the camera, make it, and have it online and receiving feedback within 24 hours. That blows my mind. Like, the fact that you can iterate on an idea and find out what works, find out what doesn't work so quickly. It's just, but
that's what I was used to. I was used to being loved and hated within an 8-hour time span.
Now you see what you do is you lock yourself in a room for 2 years, and you come out and you go, ta-ta, and then you find out if everyone loves you or hates you. And you're just going to repeat that for the rest of your life. It's going to be fine. Or you can do what we're doing right now and spend a very small amount of time making a very ambitious project, which is incredibly stupid.
And now it's time for Reader Mail. Yes, that Reader Mail time that
Have you tried a Hamilton one yet?
So much. I tried to do Hamilton like 2 weeks ago.
Alexander's Reader Mail.
Oh.
It's time for Alexander's Reader Mail. and he's hoping that he doesn't fail. So just you wait. Just you wait. What's brilliant is it's 11 o'clock local time, PM. So my neighbours just heard me singing. That's fun.
Oh, that was really good too. We'll do
the whole thing. Let's do a different song from the show each episode from now on. This is good.
Hey guys, Adam here from sunny Scotland. I'm currently attending Abertay. Did I say that right?
Abertay Dundee, yep.
Okay, Abertay University in Dundee, which was recently voted #1 in Europe for game development and design courses. I am currently studying computer games technology and hope to get a job in the industry someday. My question to you both is, how much do you, as developers and businessmen, thank you, value a university degree or college education versus the experience gained from creating games or a well-developed portfolio? And do you see formal games development courses becoming the norm alongside standard software development courses in the future? Love the podcast and keep up the good work, lads. Adam.
I love this question because this is one of my favorite pub conversations with other developers. So I'm university educated game designer. So I was definitely in the first year of the game design degree they do. I don't think they still do it. I feel like they do computer game technology, but they don't do design at Newport University. And I was, the first intake. And I think back then there were probably about 3 or 4 university degrees in game design. This would have been about 11 or 12 years ago now. So the first answer is, and I think Abertay had already been around for a few years before that. Abertay, yes, he's absolutely right to say Abertay is one of the premier universities in the world at game development. It's highly respected. And I think that's the first thing to say is, I think it does have value. I think university degrees in general have value simply because they demonstrate that you're willing to stick to something for 3 years. Like as someone hiring, immediately I respect someone. It's not the only way to get my respect, but one way of getting my respect is that you saw it out, you got it done. I would also say though that is a very prestigious degree, which is great. But I think the key thing is, I think the comparison at the core of the question is perhaps the wrong one. I don't compare industry experience with university experience. They're very different things. I think university experience is an amazing way to get started. It's an amazing way to kind of, build a foundation, effectively. That's what education is. It's a foundation. What you will realize is on your first job, after maybe the first 2 or 3 months, you'll feel like you've learned
nothing.
You'll feel like you've learned as much in the first couple of months in industry as you did in university. That's not to devalue university, because university is what got you into that room to learn that stuff, And
that's my side of the equation. Is I am.
You have a real degree, don't you?
Well, yeah.
You have 2 real degrees.
Yes, and
Nerd.
And that also comes from sort of my upbringing, and expectation that, you will get a degree and then you will get a higher degree. And just the environment that I sort of grew up in, there is this sort of expectation of a higher degree. When I really boil it down, because obviously I have a lot of friends and colleagues over the years who do not have college degrees. They graduated high school. The way I've looked at these things as they are insurance. They are essentially pieces of paper that are insurance, and they can get you in the room. They can open doors. They can do those things that otherwise you would need to, have a really legitimate portfolio or have a strong thing that puts you on radar. I know that when I was looking at folks to hire, I would obviously look. When we would hire journalists, every single time there would be like 200 applications, and I looked through 200 applications, and if I saw Columbia J School on there, you got an interview because it's on there. Now, did I ever hire any of those people? Nope. because there were more qualified candidates after speaking to some other folks and seeing their work and then talking to them who certainly understood the industry way better than some of these people with like really prestigious degrees. So I think it gives you a better chance, but does that keep you in like, and this is again where we're speaking cultural differences then, because obviously in America you can get hired and fired far more easily than you can in sort of European countries. So I think there is sort of a cultural difference once you are in the door, but I do think that piece of paper helps you get in there.
I think the counterbalance here, because I feel we should address some of the negatives around education. I think the some of the negatives around education, that's a very badly framed sentence. Some of the
come on, $200,000 of debt is totally cool.
This is the thing is university is really expensive. For the longest time in the UK, and I directly benefited from this. You know, I was from a low income family, so I had a lot of support going to university. I got a lot of I still had to, you know, I worked about half-time job to pay my way through university, but you know, I got help. I couldn't have gone to university in the current system in the UK. I definitely couldn't have gone to university in the system in America. It wouldn't have been a door that was open to me. And it's really interesting to me, like for example, one of my younger sisters, she's super smart. Like there's that scene we mentioned Serenity earlier. There's that scene in Serenity where the character's talking about his younger sister, and like, you think I'm smart, she's incredible. It's that this my sister's genius. But she made a decision not to go to university because she looked at the price of it, and she looked at like whether she thought it would help her get a job, and she made a very informed decision. I'm not going to go to university. She now works in government, and she's surrounded by people 10 years older than her because they had to go to higher education and then pay off their debts and then get the job that she now has. So there are definitely job paths that don't need a degree. What Alexander said...
But do you think that so I don't know if in the UK she would have the same sort of situation in the States where it doesn't necessarily affect her in her 20s, but when
You've mentioned this before, this idea of a ceiling though degree. I've never encountered that in the UK. I don't think culturally we don't so much care about whether you got a degree. We care what private school you went to here. Like if you look at like politicians, like top ranking politicians in the UK, all went to one of about 3 or 4 private primary schools. Like that's the elitism in the UK, whereas America, I think that elitism maybe sits more in the universities, which is actually fairer, but still, you know, not so great. I don't think that ceiling exists as much in the UK. I'm sure it has an effect. And what I would say, to bring this back to the games industry, is I've never heard anyone in the games industry say, well, I didn't get that person because they didn't have a degree. In the games industry, and we never will, I don't care if you've got a degree or not, frankly, from a hiring point of view. What I care about is your portfolio. I care about the work you produce. The reality is, if you've been to university, you might be producing much more interesting work. So I care less about the paper than what's in your show reel. What games can you send me that you've built? What demo have you made in Unity or Unreal that like you're really proud of? That's the stuff that will impress me. Being at a university like Abertay means that you're probably surrounded by great people. I've spoken recently to kind of young people, graduates who haven't got the experience or at a university like yours, which means when I say to them, well, can you get an artist to look at this? They don't know any artists, whereas you do. You're in a room full of people who are dreaming about working in the games industry, which is an amazing opportunity for you to kind of build that portfolio work. But it's, you know, that's what I care about as someone hiring. What Alexander said about like sifting through CVs, I can understand that in a journalistic context. That's never how we'll do it at Bithell Games, because it doesn't matter. Your degree doesn't necessarily mean anything like that. It's cool, it's impressive, it's going to impress me, it's something for us to talk about in the interview, but you're not going to get an interview unless you send me a really badass demo.
And do you see formal games development courses becoming the norm alongside standard software development?
It's a weird one because I think often the way these courses were set up was that they're almost like an easy mode version. Sorry, there's a fire alarm going off somewhere near me. It's not in my building, so I think I'm okay. If sprinklers start up, I'll let you know. But I think the weird thing is these kind of sprung out of in a lot of universities. I don't think this is the case in Abertay, for example, but in a lot of universities they sprung up as kind of easy mode computer science courses, which isn't fair. And a lot of courses have turned into these amazing kind of courses. But I think there is that stigma potentially of a game-specific programming course. I think I'd be laughed out of a lot of rooms with my computer game design degree. If I was back on the job market looking for a job and I had my computer game design degree. Fortunately now, obviously, I have other experiences that I'd be able to pull on in an interview or in a CV, but, it is a very specialised skill set. So I don't think it's ever going to hit the same level of prestige. To me, it's a really good vocational kind of qualification, and you will be developing amazing skills that will be super useful in the games industry. It's a really interesting time to be a programmer in the games industry because what you have a lot of low-skilled programmers like myself who are making games in Unity, getting by just fine, but the second we hit a bug or we want to do something that the engine isn't built to do, we're stuck. You basically got a lot of very interested and talented amateurs. And if you're a great games programmer, you could be working at one of those engine companies. You could also be working in a technology position in a games company. It's a really interesting time to be a very, very good games programmer because there's a lot of people like me who are kind of not so good, but getting by.
Well, and obviously if we grow, then you certainly want someone who's better than you.
Yeah, totally. I want to hire people who are way, 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 way better than me at programming. And, a few people who are probably not quite so good, but will get better than me in time.
If you have a burning question about games, game development, or just about the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@BithelGames.com. That's contact@BithelGames.com, through the YouTube comments of this show, or on Twitter by pinging at Mike Bithell, at Slawinski, or our AI at Volume Game. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. We can always use your support, so please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and positive reinforcement on whatever other platforms you're hearing this show on whenever possible. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Downen. We'll be back next week. I'm Alexander Slawinski. Thanks again, and get in the last word, Mike.
11:05 p.m.